Shadow Slave. By Guiltythree. Chapter 82, Fear of the Unknown. Sunny fell into the soft embrace of spiderwebs, screaming, his whole body convulsing in spasms of terrible pain. The unbearable agony radiated through his nervous system, his mind drowning in the endless torrent of torturous, excruciating, harrowing suffering. It felt as though every muscle, every fiber, every molecule of his body was being torn apart and reassembled, only to be torn apart again. His eyes, especially, felt as though there were two white-hot metal rods inserted in them, making all the other pain pale in comparison. Or maybe they had become searing spheres of molten metal themselves. He clawed at his face, leaving bloody marks on it. However, seconds later they were already gone, erased by some unknown force. His voice was soon gone, too, leaving Sunny without an outlet to express his horrible torment. The process was the opposite of the gentle rebirth he had experienced after passing the first nightmare. It was violent, ruthless, and unnatural, forcefully reshaping Sunny's body into something that it was not meant to be. That nothing was ever meant to be. Powerless to stop it, Sunny had no choice but to endure the agony. All he could do was try not to go mad from pain. Tears were streaming down his face, leaving bloody trails in their wake. There was no end to torture. Then, after what felt like an eternity, there was. The pain subsided, lessened, and finally vanished. Sunny was left lying on the thick carpet of spiderwebs, utterly drained and depleted. And the silence that was broken only by the hoarse sound of his ragged breathing. The spell's voice whispered, "You have acquired a new attribute. One of your attributes is ready to evolve." Sunny remained motionless for a long time, slowly coming back to his senses. The memory of the terrible ordeal was still echoing in his mind, making him shudder from time to time. He was afraid to open his eyes and look at his body, afraid to see himself changed in some horrific, repulsive way. Have I become a monster? Feeling a sense of dread, Sunny shut his eyes tighter. However, he did not feel like a monster. In fact, he didn't feel different at all. From what he could tell, he still had 2 hands, 2 legs, and soft human skin. There was no change in his strength and resilience. It was as though nothing had happened. Come on. Just do it. With a nervous sigh, Sunny opened his eyes and looked himself over. Everything was the same. He shifted his perception and studied himself again through the shadow. He was still human. Well, something did change, but he couldn't quite describe it. It was as though his vision was slightly different from before. The world seemed deeper, somehow. Sunny only noticed the difference because of the contrast between his own perception and that of the shadow. Previously, they were more or less similar. A drop of ichor that came from the weaver's eye. Carefully, he raised a hand and touched his eyes. They felt the same, but they were also different. He just couldn't understand in what way. Lowering his hand, Sunny noticed a drop of blood on one of his fingers. It came from a small scratch on his cheek, one that had not healed like the others. Deep inside his blood, Sunny noticed a barely visible hint of the golden shine. As if the radiant drop of golden liquid he had absorbed was still there, now a part of him, strongly diluted and fused into his own bloodstream. The shine was so faint that he had almost missed it. Sunny suspected that in the light, it wouldn't be visible at all. What the hell have I done to myself? That was the moment when he accidentally glanced at the pupitre shroud, simultaneously thinking about the golden shine. Something switched in Sunny's head, and suddenly, he saw the memory differently. His eyes widened. Under the surface of the gray fabric, 5 glowing embers were shining with ethereal light. Each of them represented a nexus and anchor of countless diamond strings that stretched to different parts of the armor, weaving an intricate, elaborate, unpredictable pattern. It looked a lot like the inner void of the spell, only at an infinitely smaller scale. However, Sunny was surprised to find out that he sort of understood the pattern. A newly found innate knowledge helped him sense the traces of logic behind the seemingly chaotic placement of the strings, a defined purpose behind every twist and turn. They were meant to achieve certain effects: durability, resilience, and another, more complex type of protection. The hint of understanding came naturally to him, as though it was his innate ability. I need to study this further. Intrigued and apprehensive, he entered the Soul Sea. A familiar dark expanse of still water appeared in front of his mind's eye. There was the looming shadow core, the shining satellites of his memories, and the strange feeling that something was moving just beyond the periphery of his vision. Out of habit, Sunny turned his head to try and catch sight of that something, knowing that he would not see anything. However, this time, he did. With a startled yelp, Sunny flinched away and lost his balance. What the hell? What the actual hell? Out there in the darkness, at the border of the dim light cast by the shining memories, stood motionless black figures. They were shadows. Shadows of creatures he had killed. There was a shadow that resembled the slave with broad shoulders and bloodied back, one whose name Sunny had never bothered to learn. His figure was deformed and horrifying, as he had been transformed into a murderous beast after becoming the host of a Mountain King's larva. That larva was then strangled by Sunny. The shadow of the Mountain King itself was towering above him, just as dreadful and abhorrent as the tyrant had been when still alive. Sunny shuddered as he remembered escaping from the horrid creature's claws. The shadow of the cruel slaver that had hit him with the whip was also there, standing beside the tyrant. This was the first, and for now the only, human whose life Sunny had ended with his own 2 hands. He even stole the boots and cloak of the dead man's body. On both sides of them, there were other shadows. Hulking carapace scavengers stood silently, their pincers lowered to the ground. A fearsome centurion's savage silhouette could be seen among them, surrounded by the giant centipedes, bulbous knots of carnivorous worms and a few strange, mane-eating flowers. Every single being that had fallen by Sunny's hand was there in the form of a shadow. Or, to be more precise, every being whose shadow's fragments had been absorbed by him. Despite the fact that shadows had no eyes, he couldn't help but feel that they were all staring at him, silent, motionless. Watching, feeling cold shivers running down his spine, Sunny gulped and stood up, his legs shaking a little. Finding out that a small army of dead shadows had appeared inside your soul sea was not the most pleasant of surprises. Let alone if those shadows once belonged to creatures who you had personally slain. He clenched his teeth. Can I repeat? What the actual hell? Chapter 83, 5. The shadows stared at Sunny, and Sunny stared at the shadows. After a while, the situation became a bit awkward. Sunny shifted a little, then hesitantly asked, Are you guys not going to do anything? The shadows did not react, remaining as motionless and quiet as they had been from the start. As a matter of fact, he didn't see them move or show any sign of life at all. In that regard, they were even more lifeless than his echo had been here in the Sea of Soul. Sunny scratched his head. His initial fear was slowly disappearing. At first, he was scared out of his wits, but more so from being startled than from feeling an actual threat. This was his soul sea, after all. Very few things could harm him here. Sunny was pretty sure that the shadows were not capable of doing anything, let alone attacking him. They seemed more like manifestations of some weird facet of his aspect rather than actual beings. As such, they weren't dangerous. The question was, why did the shadows suddenly appear? After briefly thinking about it, Sunny came to the conclusion that they did not actually appear, per se. Instead, they were always here, it's just that he had not been able to see them. But now, with his eyes changed by the strange transformation he had gone through, he could, just like he could see the diamond strings inside the puppeteer's shroud. Speaking of the puppeteer's shroud. Glancing at the silent shadows one last time to make sure that they would not lunge at him, Sunny frowned with suspicion and turned away. His back instantly began to tingle. Just think of them as fashionable pieces of furniture. Who says soul seas don't need a touch of interior design? Somewhat consoled, he walked closer to the shining spheres that represented memories and summoned the puppeteer's shroud. One of the spheres floated down and slowly dimmed, revealing the armor within. Just like before, Sunny could see 5 glowing nexuses and countless strings permeating the gray fabric. They resembled miniature stars assembled into a constellation. The shroud came from a tyrant, which is a class of nightmare creatures with 5 soul cores. 5 soul cores, 5th tier memory, 5 nexuses. Makes sense. For some reason, the number 5 moved something in his mind. Sunny scowled, not understanding the feeling of unease that suddenly appeared out of nowhere and disrupted the flow of his thoughts. Trying to concentrate on the task at hand, he summoned the runes describing the puppeteer's shroud. The familiar description appeared in the air around the armor, memory, puppeteer's shroud. Memory rank, awakened. Memory tier, V, memory type, armor. Memory description, a worm of doubt. The identification of the tier was new. It seems that the spell decided to be helpful and incorporated Sunny's new understanding of the inner workings of memories into its interface. Tiers were not something that humans had learned from the spell. Instead, it was just an improvised way of differentiating memories of different power levels within the same rank. It was often unreliable and outright wrong, but it was better than nothing. But in the case of Sunny, the information was 100% true. He could confirm it with his own two eyes just by counting the number of core remnants inside a memory. He could even understand their purpose. That might be extremely useful. However, his attention was drawn to something else. At the very bottom of the description, a new cluster of runes appeared. Memory enchantments, enhanced durability, doubtless. Sunny smiled. That was what he was hoping for. Previously, he had only been able to intuitively sense the special qualities of his memories, with no way to learn their true nature and limits except for the trial and error approach. And using that method during a battle was not conducive to survival. Now, however, he concentrated on one of the enchantments. Enchantment, doubtless. Enchantment description provides the wearer with a small amount of protection against mind attacks. Good to know. The amount was small because it was just an awakened memory. Since enhanced durability was self-explanatory, Sunny dismissed the puppeteer's shroud and summoned the silver bell. The small bell had only one spark of light, which was much less bright than the ones inside the puppeteer's shroud, at that. Studying the runes did not show anything interesting. It was a Tier 1 dormant memory with a single enchantment that increased the range at which its ringing could be heard to several kilometers. Finally, it was time to take a look at the Midnight Shard. The graceful blade appeared in front of Sunny in all its austere beauty. Memory, Midnight Shard. Memory rank, awakened. Memory tier, 3. Memory description, forged from the shard of a fallen star, this stalwart blade is firm and unyielding. It favors those who are willing to fight to the last drop of blood and knows no surrender. Memory enchantments, unbroken. Enchantment description, this blade refuses to be broken, and thus is durable beyond reason. It will greatly enhance the power of its wielder when they are close to death, however only if the wielder is unwilling to surrender. Sunny sighed, simultaneously satisfied and disappointed. Now he knew how to access the well of power that hid in the deepest parts of his heart when the Midnight Shard was in his hand. However, it could only be done when he was at the death's door, wounded and minutes away from perishing. It could either save him from a dire situation or create an opportunity for a very heroic last stand. Sunny did not care for heroics, so the second option did not seem appealing at all. The first one was much more useful, but only in the case of him screwing up terribly and getting himself in a lethal amount of trouble. In other words, it could only be used if he failed. In normal battles, the special qualities of the Midnight Shard were of no use at all. A pity. But an ace in your sleeve in case things really go south is not bad either. Done with his memories, Sunny was ready to learn of the new attribute he had received. Considering how much pain he had to go through to acquire the damn thing, he had pretty high expectations. Looking for the cluster of runes representing his attributes, Sunny focused his attention and carefully read their names. There were 5 attributes: Fated, Mark of Divinity, Child of Shadows, and the new one, Blood Weave. Sunny was about to summon the description of the Blood Weave, but then stopped. Something was not right. Something did not add up. The feeling of unease from before had returned, now much stronger. When did he first feel it? For some reason, his thoughts were slow and murky. He felt a strong inclination to forget all about the strange feeling and concentrate on something else. But this time, he did not. It was when I was studying the puppeteer's shroud. And it was connected to the number 5. 5. What meaning was there to the number 5? With his attention beginning to wane, Sunny bit his lip, causing drops of blood to roll down. A burst of pain cleared his mind for a moment. There were 5 attributes: Fated, Mark of Divinity, Child of Shadows, and Blood Weave. What? There were 5 attributes. But he only counted 4. Bewildered, Sunny stared at the runes. He was sure that there was a 5th attribute. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't read its name and description. Every time his gaze fell on the runes corresponding to the 5th attribute, he would find himself distracted, his memory wiped clean of any mention of it. Just remembering that there were 5 attributes was incredibly hard. Clenching his teeth, Sunny tried to keep his concentration, not allowing himself to be distracted. He was not going to forget. 5. It's 5. There's 5 of them, damn it. Immediately after he said those words out loud, something changed. It was as though an invisible veil had fallen from his eyes. Or, rather, from his mind. Sunny froze, shock and fear permeating his heart. He was remembering. Didn't I see a dream? Yes, of course. He saw Cassie standing over him with panic in her eyes. Begging him to remember the number 5. No, wait. Was that a dream? At the time, he believed so. But then, he forgot. Just as he had forgotten what actually happened on that day. On the day when Cassie woke him up to tell him something important. Chapter 84, Black Seed. It happened on the day they killed the carapace demon. Back then, all 3 of them were utterly exhausted. After moving away from the corpse of the giant creature and finding a good hiding spot, they fell to the ground and immediately fell asleep. But they didn't stay asleep for long. An hour or 2 later, Sunny was shaken awake by Cassie, who was holding him by the shoulders. There was an expression of terror written clearly on her face. Sunny! Sunny! Wake up! Instantly coming back to his senses, he jumped to his feet and summoned the Midnight Shard, afraid that they were under attack. However, there was no one around except for panicked Cassie and wary Nephi's, who was in a similar pose, her sword raised and ready to strike. Confused, Sunny looked at the blind girl. Cassie! What's the matter? Grabbing him by the shoulders again, she brought her face close and whispered in a begging tone, Sunny, you have to stop it. Please. You are the only one who can. He frowned, failing to understand what exactly he was supposed to stop. Did she see another vision? Trying to calm her, he said in a measured tone, It's all right, Cassie. Slow down, breathe. Tell us what happened. Start from the beginning. She desperately shook her head. There's no time. I will forget soon. We all will. But you have to remember. We will all forget soon. What does she mean? Not able to see Sunny's dazed expression, Cassie yelled, You have to remember, Sunny. 5. It's 5. Remember. You have to remember. It's 5. Remember. 5. The blind girl was not making any sense. Sunny carefully put his arm around her, feeling how scared she was from her shaking body. All right, Cass. I promise I'll remember. 5, right. See, it's pretty hard to forget. Nephi's was looking at them with a frown, not neglecting to scan the surroundings for any signs of danger from time to time. For some reason, Cassie was only talking to Sunny, not paying her any attention. What was it that she thought Sunny could do, but Changing Star could not? Hearing his answer, the blind girl calmed down a little. However, she was still terrified. Good. Good. Remember, it's 5. You promised. Her voice sounded quieter and quieter, as though she was not sure of what she was saying. Sunny was barely able to discern her mumbling. The more complex a thought, the harder it will be to hold on to it. That's why I can only tell you this one word, the simplest thing to impart. When the right time comes, it might change things. Carefully choosing his words, Sunny hesitantly asked, Cassie. Can you tell us what happened, exactly? Hearing his voice, the blind girl flinched and raised her head to face him. There were still traces of fear in her eyes, but mostly, it had been replaced by confusion. Huh? Did something happen? Sunny blinked. Wasn't she the one who woke them up in a panic? Wait. Why did she wake us up, to begin with? For some reason, he had trouble remembering the details of the past few minutes. The conversation they just had was already hazy in his memory. I guess I'm still groggy from waking up so abruptly. Lack of sleep affects concentration. You wanted to tell us something. It had to do with the... Number 5. Cassie raised her eyebrows. 5. Why 5? Sunny didn't know what to say. He was going to ask the same question. I have no clue. Perplexed, he looked at Nephi's, hoping that she will be able to clear the situation. Changing Star was standing a few steps away with a distracted expression on her face. Sensing his gaze, she stared at him and asked, Why do you have your sword out? Sunny glanced at the midnight shard and tried to remember what had caused him to summon the memory. I'm not sure. Why did you summon yours? Nephi's looked down, as though noticing the sword in her hands for the first time. An expression of doubt appeared on her face. What's wrong with our heads today? Understanding that it was pointless to expect help from Nephi's, Sunny sighed and turned back to Cassie. Did you see another vision? The blind girl trembled. Her eyes opened wide, once again filled with fear. A vision. Yes, I saw a vision. An awful, awful vision. What did you see? She was silent for a few moments, trying to remember. A deep frown appeared on her face. Finally, Cassie quietly said, I saw a mountain. A mountain of corpses. Countless bodies piled on each other until they formed a blood-soaked hill. And at the top of it, a tiny black seed was floating in a pool of blood. She grew silent, then continued, that was the past, I think. But then I saw the future. A future. It was us. Oh, gods. We were. Her voice trembled. As though not daring to say something aloud, Cassie stopped. Sunny waited for a while, then carefully asked, we were what? The blind girl turned to him in confusion. What? He scratched the back of his head. What were they just talking about? You were. Telling us about your vision. I think. Cassie frowned. What vision? To his embarrassment, Sunny wasn't sure either. He just remembered something about the number 5 and a seed. For some reason, he felt as though that number was very important. But why? He had no idea. I forgot. Suddenly, Nephi's, who was standing nearby, lowered her hands and dismissed the sword that she had been holding for some reason. Looking at them with a bit of confusion, she hesitantly asked, why are you guys awake? We need to rest. Something might get attracted by the demon's corpse, so we'd better return to peak condition as soon as possible. Distracted and already forgetting about the conversation with Cassie, Sunny blinked a couple of times, shrugged, and decided to go back to sleep. None of this made sense anyway. They were probably struck dumb by exhaustion. He felt so tired. A few hours later, when the shadow noticed the winged creature circling around the island, he awoke again. By that time, the memory of Cassie's warning was so fragmented and hazy that it seemed like a strange dream. But the seed was already planted deep into his subconscious. And now that it had blossomed, Sunny was finally able to fight through the haze of oblivion and remember everything.